All right, hello everybody. Today we're going to be discussing a much beloved lift in our community, which is the Larsen press, which was a lift that existed definitely before Bald Omni-Man, but was really popularized by him in the sense that he associated it with the Chad culture that's emerged in the past couple months, or rather past couple years in the natty community. People are obsessed with the Larsen press because it does look cool, but that's basically it. There are reasons to do the Larsen press, which we will go into, but there are also reasons not to do the Larsen press, especially for most people. I myself do not Larsen press for these very reasons, and today we'll go over what I would prefer most people do instead over the Larsen press if you insist on doing a Larsen press type movement. So first, let's go into the reasons why we actually Larsen press. So it's a self-limiting variation, meaning we can get a similar or slightly lesser amount of fatigue out of less weight. And the second reason is that Larsen benching removes lower body fatigue from the bench equation. So if you're training your lower body maximally, you can Larsen press maximally still, as opposed to a more leg drive dependent bench. Maybe fatiguing your legs will have an impact on your performance. A common misconception which I've seen growing up, even among people who are within the natural community, a good example of this is FitnessFAQs. Hopefully I will remember to put his little YouTube short up right now.
Stop benching with your feet on the floor. Larsen press is better for bodybuilding. With our feet up, we can't use the lower body to cheat. Leg drive is eliminated and our arch is restricted. The weight we can lift when benching will be lighter than usual, but the effort remains high. Reduced absolute load while still allowing higher relative intensities is good stuff. The outcome is serious growth and lower injury risk. Technique is simplified because we're not doing a full body movement anymore. We only have to focus on upper body cueing, making it easier to hit our prime mover muscles. If you're bench pressing with the main goal being hypertrophy, keep those feet up. Embrace a lack of ego with Larsen press and you'll make a lighter weight go a long way.
Larsen pressing is not better for bodybuilding, and it doesn't prevent cheating. We already discussed why we actually Larsen press, which is because it's a self-limiting variation, which allows us to get a similar amount of stimulus, or slightly lesser, and it eliminates lower body fatigue. It does not prevent cheating, and it is not better for bodybuilding. Good bodybuilding movements tend to be, and there are exceptions to this, more stable movements. So Larsen press being one, especially if you have a thinner bench and not a thicker bench, which is more unstable, it means that the pressing can be limited by other factors, but we'll get into that. Let's talk about who has an appropriate use case for Larsen press. People who bench 300 pounds for reps already, higher reps, like sets of 8 to 12, kinda. People who want to Larsen bench and have earned that right, and people who are looking to remove leg or back fatigue from their barbell bench training. So if you're deadlifting maximally, if you're squatting maximally, you might find that they interfere with your bench training. Larsen press would be a good way to get around that and make your bench training more consistent. That's really the key. Larsen bench is not appropriate for Johnny one plate novice and intermediates, Johnny bodybuilder, people who already don't know how to use leg drive, and people who only want to do it because it looks cool. So there is a slight difference between people who want to do it because it looks cool and people who want to Larsen bench because they Larsen bench. Larsen benching can be a pursuit in its own right, but whether or not it is worthwhile for most people to do that is a completely different question. And I would be inclined to say that it is not worthwhile for most people unless you just really want, I don't know, like a 4-plate Larsen press. But even then, you're probably better off building a lot of your Larsen pressing strength with other variations which are more stable, and then going and specializing in the Larsen press as a sort of secondary thing. So in terms of Johnny 1 plates, novices and intermediates, you probably aren't technically proficient enough at the bench to warrant removing the leg drive and the arch, or limiting the arch in your bench. So if you're spending time Larsen pressing, that's time you're not spending allocating yourself towards higher percentages, getting stronger, more neurologically adapted. Instead, you're just doing a lift which is more unstable and progresses slower. Larsen press is not really appropriate for Johnny bodybuilders, so people who are looking to build up their pecs, shoulders, and triceps. It can work in the context of if you are already developed enough bencher or have developed enough upper body presses. I'm not saying you can't build big muscles from Larsen pressing, you clearly can. But is it the best way to go about it? Absolutely not. You can use other variations which are also self-limiting but more stable, which allow you to get more hypertrophy out of your work. And people who don't know how to use leg drive effectively. So that's already kind of who were we talking about with Johnny 1 plate, novices and intermediates. It also just means people that maybe they're intermediate or going on to advanced, but they don't know how to use leg drive yet. I've heard of people who have very similar Larsen presses to their regular bench press, like within 10, 20 pounds. And that's not unusual per se, but it does mean that their proficiency with leg drive is probably not as good as it could be. So if your goal is to be maximally strong and you don't know how to use leg drive to your best ability yet, you're probably better off using a different variation to help you ingrain the pattern of leg drive rather than doing Larsen bench to get stronger. So before we discuss what I would recommend doing instead, we need to go over why people Larsen bench in the first place. So we already kind of did that at the beginning, the low fatigue and the self-limiting aspect of the variation. So here are the main pros. Larsen press generally provides extra range of motion compared to a competition style or feet on the ground bench press. It reduces the lower body fatigue. It produces slightly more pure pressing muscle development per unit of fatigue, and it's arguably less technical in some senses. It also just looks cool, so that's 5 benefits. The cons are, it's less stable, it has less ability to load the muscles with higher weights because of factors not always relating to pressing muscle strength. So you might lose stability, you could just get psyched out from the weight. This also means that because of this, you might not be able to reach the what's called a raw stimulus magnitude that you might want out of a bench press variation. So with a competition style bench press or a arched bench press with your feet on the ground, whatever you want to call it, you will probably get a higher raw stimulus compared to a Larsen press. It's just that the stimulus to fatigue ratio of a Larsen press might be better. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's worth replacing, especially when you're in the novice and intermediate stage, late intermediate, or even early advanced. And it's potentially less safe. So the Larsen press is potentially less safe because of the reason that we talked about. You can get psyched out easier, it's less stable, there's more risks involved. Benching is already technically probably the most dangerous exercise you can do, especially alone. But if you play your cards right, it will always be a safer exercise. So don't get too psyched out about it. So how do we solve the cons while preserving the pros? And the answer I have for that is the feet up bench with the feet on the bench, which we will cut to now. So here I greet you from the bench in order to go over a variation which is very, very similar to a Larsen press, but I think gives you some extra benefits and mitigates some of the cons. So here with the empty bar, I'm going to take my regular bench setup, And then I'm going to unrack the bar, and then I'm going to stick my feet up. So that's your typical Larsen press, set up in such a way that is the most safe in my opinion. You should never take your feet off the ground before you've unracked the bar and have held it there stably for at least a second or two. Now, the feet up bench with the feet on the bench is very similar to a Larsen press. It actually provides more range of motion and more stability, so it probably benefits Johnny Bodybuilder compared to the Larsen press. This doesn't make it a better exercise than the standard bench press, but it makes it perhaps a better exercise for most people compared to the Larsen press in the context of replacing or filling out the volume of bench press volume. So going to get in the same sort of position, right? Same grip. And then I'm going to unrack the bar and then put my feet up like so. Having the feet up on the bench makes this kind of like a deficit floor press. It doesn't necessarily allow you to use leg drive. It does allow you to keep a little more stability side to side. It works better on thinner benches as opposed to fatter benches. So it's a variation you can do if you can't Larsen press on your bench for whatever reason. And we'll get to more of the benefits once I get back to my laptop and my notes. So this deficit floor press / feet up bench, whatever you'd like to call it, it makes pressing more stable while preserving all of the benefits of the Larsen press, including the extra ROM, the no lower body fatigue, more pure pressing muscle development, and lower technicality. While still looking cool. I think it looks pretty cool. I would encourage beginners and intermediates to not focus on these types of self-limiting variations. I know I personally don't, where the main movement is modified, especially stability-wise. I would say if you're going to consider adding a bench variation, consider something which is at least as stable or more stable compared to your typical bench press until you reach a certain level where maybe that's not the best move for you. But by the time you've reached that point, you'd probably be educated enough on programming to intelligently make that decision for yourself. Instead of Larsen pressing, I would consider changing the grip. So close grips, wide grips, both of those are developmentally very good. Types of inclines, so you can do declines, low incline, higher incline, or using methods that increase rep quality on the typical bench press first, such as t-shirt touch pauses or using tempos. Tempos especially are incredibly effective because most people skip out on that very important portion of pressing, which actually increasing rep quality in your pressing is a very surefire way to get stronger faster. By doing bounce reps or touch and go reps, you might find that, you can add 5 pounds here or there more often, but because the quality is suffering, you might not be making the gains that you should, and it might lead to a plateau faster compared to just using like a 3-1-0 tempo. So that's 3 seconds on the way down, 1 second pause, lift as fast as possible for the bench press. Using these types of variations over the Larsen press or even the feet up bench is probably more beneficial to muscular development and bench strength specificity in both the long and the short runs. The people who resort to Larsen press are the people who need to resort to Larsen press. You shouldn't go out of your way to do it compared to using your higher raw stimulus magnitude, more stable movements. That's all I have for now. Take care, train hard, and have a great day.